The abandoned mining station on asteroid B-247 had been silent for 3 years. Its dark corridors held nothing but stale air and drifting dust, until today. Tom Miller, a human reconnaissance soldier, moved carefully through the facility, his boots making soft thuds against the metal floor. His mission was simple: sweep the station for any salvageable resources and report back to base. Tom's helmet lights cut through the darkness as he checked room after room. The station had been evacuated during the war between humans and the Drakari Empire, like many other outposts in the asteroid belt. Now, with the conflict finally cooling down, both sides were picking through the wreckage of abandoned facilities. The soldier was about to mark another section as clear when his sensors picked up something unusual, a faint heat signature coming from the medical bay. Tom readied his rifle, more out of habit than necessity. Pirates sometimes used these abandoned stations, though they usually left more obvious signs of their presence. The medical bay's door was sealed, but Tom's override codes quickly dealt with that. As the door slid open with a grinding sound, his lights revealed a sight that made him freeze: a stasis pod, still active despite the station's minimal power. Inside, through the frosted glass, he could make out a slender figure with pale blue skin, a young Drakari female. Tom's first instinct was to call it in, but something made him hesitate. The pod's readout showed it had been active for 3 years, running on emergency power. Someone had left her here, either forgotten or abandoned during the evacuation. The pod's power supply was almost depleted. In less than a day, it would fail, and its occupant would die. Protocol demanded he report any Drakari presence immediately. The war might be winding down, but their species were still technically enemies. Yet as Tom stood there, watching the gentle rise and fall of the alien girl's chest, he couldn't bring himself to simply walk away or call in a potential threat. The pod's medical readouts showed severe plasma burns and internal injuries. She had been badly hurt when they put her in stasis. "Command's going to kill me for this," Tom muttered, beginning the pod's wake-up sequence. He knew there were Drakari healing centers in the neutral zones now. Places where their advanced medical technology could treat injuries like hers. Getting her there wouldn't be easy, or strictly legal, but Tom had seen enough death in this war. As the pod began its warming cycle, Tom started gathering medical supplies from around the bay. He didn't know much about Drakari physiology, but he knew the basics of treating shock and trauma. The girl would be weak when she woke up, and probably terrified to find herself face to face with a human soldier. Tom checked his suit's translator, making sure it was updated with the latest Drakari language files. Then he sat down to wait, his mind already working on how he would explain this to his superiors, or if he even should. Sometimes, he reflected, the right thing to do wasn't always the official thing to do. The pod's display showed 15 minutes until completion of the wake-up sequence. Tom removed his helmet, deciding it would be better if the first thing she saw was a human face rather than a faceless soldier. After all, if their species were ever going to move past this war, someone had to take the first step. In the dim light of the medical bay, Tom waited, watching the numbers count down, about to make a choice that would change both their lives forever. The stasis pod's final beep echoed through the medical bay. Tom stood up, his heart pounding as the frost on the glass began to clear. The young Drakari's eyes fluttered open, brilliant amber against her pale blue skin. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, confused and disoriented. Then she saw Tom. Her reaction was instant and painful. She tried to surge upward, but her weakened muscles betrayed her. A cry of fear escaped her lips as she pressed herself against the back of the pod, her breathing rapid and shallow. Tom raised his hands slowly, keeping them where she could see them. "Easy," he said, the translator in his suit converting his words to the musical tones of the Drakari language. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." He took a careful step back, giving her space. The girl's eyes darted around the room, recognition slowly dawning on her face. "The mining station," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. The translator rendered her words in English. How long? 3 years, Tom replied gently. The war's mostly over now. There's a ceasefire. She touched her side where the plasma burns had been, now partially healed by the stasis pod's basic medical functions. The evacuation, she said, pieces of memory returning. I was helping in the medical bay when we were hit. They must have left me. I'm Tom, he said, slowly reaching for a water packet he'd prepared. What's your name? She hesitated, studying him with those amber eyes. Rhea, she finally answered. When he held out the water, she took it cautiously. Her hands shook as she brought it to her lips. Rhea, Tom nodded, I know you have no reason to trust me, but your pod was almost out of power. If I hadn't found you today. He let the implications hang in the air. There are healing centers in the neutral zones now. Places that can treat your injuries properly. I want to help you get to one. Why? Rhea asked, her voice stronger now. We're enemies. You should be arresting me, or... She trailed off, unable to voice the darker possibilities. Tom shook his head. The war has taken enough lives. I'm not adding another one to the count, enemy or not. He began gathering the medical supplies he'd prepared. But we need to move soon. My patrol check-in is in 4 hours, and we need to be long gone by then. Rhea watched him work, confusion evident on her face. You'd risk court-martial for me? A Dracari? I'd risk it for anyone who needed help, Tom replied, not looking up from his work. That's what separates good soldiers from just soldiers. He paused, then added, Can you walk? Rhea carefully swung her legs over the side of the pod. Her movements were stiff, but determination showed in her face. I can try. She attempted to stand, but her legs buckled. Tom caught her before she could fall, and she instinctively grabbed his arms for support. For a moment, they stood there, human and Dracari, in what might have been the first peaceful contact between their species in this sector for years. Then Rhea steadied herself and took a shaky step forward. There's a small scout ship docked in Bay 3, Tom said, supporting her as they moved toward the door. If we can reach it, we might just have a chance at this crazy plan. As they made their way through the dark corridor, both knew there was no turning back. They were now bound together in a dangerous game of survival, trust, and hope, a game that would either end in triumph or tragedy. The journey to Docking Bay 3 proved more challenging than either Tom or Rhea had anticipated. Every few steps, they had to pause as Rhea's legs threatened to give out. The sound of their breathing echoed through the empty corridors, seeming impossibly loud in the abandoned station. Wait, Rhea whispered suddenly, gripping Tom's arm. There's something you should know about Bay 3. She leaned against the wall, catching her breath. During the evacuation, there was heavy fighting there. The bay's outer doors were damaged. Tom felt his stomach sink. How badly? They were operating on emergency power when I went into stasis, she explained. The mechanical override might still work, but... She looked at him meaningfully. Someone would have to stay behind to operate it. Before Tom could respond, his suit's comm system crackled to life. Patrol 7, this is command. You've missed your position check. Report status. Tom froze. The check-in wasn't supposed to be for another 3 hours. Either he'd lost track of time helping Rhea, or command had changed the schedule. Neither option was good. They'll send someone to investigate, he said quietly. We need to move faster. They quickened their pace, Rhea gritting her teeth against the pain. As they rounded the final corner to Bay 3, Tom's helmet sensors picked up movement ahead. He pulled Rhea into a maintenance alcove just as a beam of light swept past them. Patrol 7, respond immediately, a different voice came through the comm, "Search team is en route to your last known position." "There's another way," Rhea whispered, her amber eyes intense. "Bay 4 has a maintenance airlock. It's smaller, meant for repair drones, but it might be our only choice," Tom finished. He checked his suit's oxygen levels, enough for two, if they were careful. "Can you handle a spacewalk?" Rhea nodded, though fear flickered across her face. "My people evolved in low gravity. We can handle vacuum exposure better than humans, even injured." They changed direction, moving as quietly as possible. Tom's mind raced through emergency protocols. The maintenance airlock would be harder to track than a full ship launch, but they'd still need transportation once they got out. Reaching Bay 4, they found the maintenance airlock untouched by the war's destruction. Tom quickly began preparing his suit for sharing oxygen. "Once we're out there, we'll have about 20 minutes to reach the emergency pods on the station's outer hull," he explained. "They're meant for miners who get stranded during asteroid walks." "Tom," Rhea said softly as he worked, "why are you really doing this?" "The truth." He paused, looking at her. "Because every time I close my eyes, I see the battles, the deaths on both sides. Maybe saving one life won't change the war's history, but it changes something in here." He tapped his chest. "That's enough for me." The sound of boots on metal echoed from a nearby corridor. Tom quickly helped Rhea into his suit's emergency oxygen system. "Ready?" She grabbed his hand, squeezing it once. "Ready." The airlock cycle seemed to take forever. As the inner door finally sealed behind them, Tom's comm crackled again. "Unknown vessel detected departing Bay 7. All units converge." "Repeat, all units." Tom allowed himself a small smile. The station's automated systems were still launching empty supply pods on their old schedule, creating a perfect diversion. As the outer door opened to the star-filled void, he felt Rhea's grip tighten on his hand. Together, they stepped into space, leaving the safety of the station behind. Before them stretched the vastness of the asteroid belt, filled with both danger and hope. They had no ship, limited oxygen, and a search team behind them, but they had something more important: trust in each other. The asteroid belt stretched before them like a river of stones in the starlight. Tom and Rhea pushed off from the station's hull, using their momentum to glide toward the emergency pods. Each pod was a small teardrop of metal, designed for one person, but they would have to make it work for two. 15 minutes of oxygen remaining, Tom's suit computer announced calmly. He could feel Rhea's breathing through their shared system, quick but controlled. The Drakari really did handle space better than humans. Despite her injuries, she moved with natural grace in zero gravity. A spotlight from the station swept past them, searching. They pressed close to a passing asteroid, using its bulk as cover. The rock surface was pockmarked with mining scars, telling silent stories of the peace before the war. "There," Rhea whispered through their linked comm, "pod cluster ahead, behind that processing debris." Tom saw it, 3 emergency pods anchored to a collection of old mining equipment. But as they approached, his heart sank. 2 of the pods were clearly damaged, their hulls torn open by either combat or debris. The third, however, looked intact. 10 minutes of oxygen remaining. They reached the pods, and Tom quickly began the activation sequence on the intact one. The pod systems hummed to life, but a red warning light flashed on the control panel. "The launch mechanism is damaged," Rhea said, examining the readouts. "It needs manual override." She looked at Tom. "I can do it. My people's engineering is similar, and you need your suit intact." "No," Tom said firmly. "You're still weak from stasis," and he stopped as movement caught his eye. Searchlights were spreading out from the station, methodically sweeping the debris field. 5 minutes of oxygen remaining. Rhea placed her hand on his faceplate, forcing him to look at her. Trust goes both ways, Tom. You saved my life. Let me help save yours. Before he could protest, she had already disconnected from his suit's oxygen supply. The cold efficiency of her movements showed her military training. She must have been more than just a medical worker during the war. Tom quickly entered the pod while Rhea worked on the launch controls. His fingers flew over the navigation system, plotting a course that would use the asteroid field's gravity to mask their trajectory. 2 minutes of oxygen remaining. The searchlights were getting closer. Tom could see the silhouettes of patrol ships now, their engines pushing debris aside as they searched. He watched Rhea through the pod's window, her movements becoming slower as she worked in the vacuum with depleting oxygen. Finally, she looked up and gave him a thumbs up, a very human gesture she must have learned somewhere. The launch mechanism hummed to life. But as she pushed away from the controls, a spotlight found them. Target located, crackled through Tom's comm, all units converge on Grid 7. Tom hit the pod's emergency hatch release. As Rhea drifted toward the opening, he reached out and grabbed her, pulling her inside just as the first warning shots lit up the space around them. The hatch sealed with a hiss of pressurization. Launch in 3, 2, 1. The pod's computer announced. The pod shot forward, its small but powerful engine hurling them into the shelter of the asteroid field. Behind them, the patrol ships opened fire, but the pod's erratic launch trajectory and the surrounding debris made targeting nearly impossible. As atmosphere filled the pod's cabin, Rhea collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, pulling in deep breaths. Despite her exhaustion, she managed a small smile. "So," she said between breaths, "still think humans are the only ones who can do the right thing?" Tom returned her smile as he guided them deeper into the asteroid field. "I think we both have a lot to learn about each other." He checked their trajectory. "Next stop, the neutral zone. That is, if we can avoid patrols, pirates, and about a million other things that could kill us out here." "Just another day in the asteroid belt," Rhea said, closing her eyes briefly. "Thank you for trusting me back there." "Thank you for proving I was right too," Tom replied, as they disappeared into the vastness of space, two unlikely allies against the universe. 6 hours into their escape, the emergency pod's cramped interior felt even smaller. Tom and Rhea had settled into an uneasy rhythm, taking turns watching the sensors for pursuit while the other rested. The pod systems hummed softly around them, barely masking the silence between them. "You never finished telling me," Tom said finally, checking their course through a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. "What were you really doing on that station? Your movements back there, those weren't medical worker reflexes." Rhea was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes reflecting the glow of the control panel. "I was intelligence," she admitted finally. "Stationed there to monitor human mining operations. The medical bay was my cover." She looked at him, waiting for his reaction. Instead of anger, Tom let out a small laugh. "That makes two of us then. I'm not really a patrol officer. Special operations, deep reconnaissance." Their eyes met, and suddenly they both started laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from exhaustion and the absurdity of life. Here they were, two spies from opposite sides, trapped in a tiny pod together. The moment was shattered by a warning alarm. "Multiple contacts," Tom announced, his training taking over. 3 ships, coming in fast from the direction of the station. "Military drives," Rhea confirmed, studying the sensor readings. "Mark 7 interceptors. They're not even trying to hide their approach." Tom's hands flew over the controls, guiding them deeper into the asteroid field. The pod wasn't built for this kind of maneuvering, but they had no choice. Behind them, the first shots from the interceptors lit up space. "They're not trying to disable us," Rhea said grimly. "Those are kill shots. Hold on." Tom yanked the controls hard, sending them into a spinning dive between 2 massive asteroids. The interceptors followed, but their larger size made the pursuit more difficult. Warning lights flashed across the pod's console. Power systems at 40%, the computer announced. Hull integrity compromised in aft section. We need to lose them, Tom muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the pod's cooling systems. Any ideas, intelligence? Rhea studied the sensor display, her face lit by its blue glow. There, she pointed. That mining tunnel through the large asteroid ahead. The interceptors are too big to follow, and their sensors will be useless in there. That tunnel could be collapsed, filled with debris, or a dead end, Tom warned. True, Rhea smiled grimly. But we're dead anyway if we stay out here. Tom nodded and aimed for the tunnel entrance. As they approached, they could see it was barely wider than their pod. The interceptors opened fire again, their shots getting closer. Power systems at 25%, the computer warned. Hull breach imminent. They plunged into the tunnel, darkness swallowing them whole. The pod's lights illuminated rough-hewn walls rushing past at terrifying speed. Behind them, the interceptors broke off pursuit, unable to follow. Multiple hull breaches detected, the computer announced calmly. Emergency seals engaged. Power systems critical. Tom, Rhea said softly, if we don't make it. We'll make it, he cut her off, focused on guiding them through the twisting tunnel. I didn't save you from that station just to die in a mining tunnel. A light appeared ahead, another exit. But as they approached it, their hearts sank. A massive cargo ship waited there, its running lights painting the asteroid in harsh shadows. Out of the tunnel and into the trap, Rhea whispered. The cargo ship's hangar doors opened like a massive mouth, ready to swallow them whole. Tom's hands tightened on the controls as he prepared for one final, desperate maneuver. Then Rhea grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with recognition as she saw the ship's markings. Wait! That's not a military vessel, it's a relief corps ship. They operate in the neutral zones, helping refugees from both sides. As if confirming her words, a transmission cut through their failing communication system. Unidentified pod, this is the medical ship Hope's Journey. We're here to help. You're safe now. The Hope's Journey's hangar bay dwarfed their tiny escape pod. As the pod settled onto the deck with a gentle thud, emergency teams rushed forward, a mix of humans, Drakari, and other species all wearing the white and green uniforms of the Relief Corps. Stay behind me, Tom said as the pod's hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Despite the friendly welcome, years of training made him cautious. But Rhea's legs buckled as she tried to stand, the adrenaline finally wearing off. A Drakari doctor rushed forward, her medical scanner already whirring. Severe plasma burns, partial healing from stasis, physical exhaustion, she listed rapidly. Get her to Medical Bay 3. Tom started to follow as they lifted Rhea onto a hovering stretcher, but a firm hand caught his shoulder. He turned to face a tall human woman with graying hair and captain's insignia. Captain Lisa Reed, she introduced herself. And you've just created quite a diplomatic situation, special operations. At Tom's surprised look, she smiled. Yes, we scanned your identity chips. Both of them. A human Spec Ops officer and a Drakari intelligence agent? The brass on both sides are going to love this. They were going to let her die, Tom said firmly. I couldn't. At ease, soldier, Reed cut him off. The Relief Corps doesn't take sides. That's why we exist. But there are procedures, especially with military personnel. A warning klaxon sounded through the ship. Captain, a voice called over the intercom, 3 Mark 7 interceptors approaching. They're demanding we hand over the fugitives. Reed's face hardened. Tell them this is a registered medical vessel under Article 7 of the Centauri Accords. We don't surrender patients. She turned back to Tom. But you need to make a choice right now. Once you officially request asylum, we can protect you. Without that, I have to turn you over. Tom looked toward the medical bay where they'd taken Rhea. Will she be okay? She's getting the best care in the sector, Reed assured him. But you didn't answer my question. The ship's hull rang with the sound of warning shots from the interceptors. Tom squared his shoulders. I, Thomas Miller, formally request asylum under the Centauri Accords. Reed nodded and spoke into her calm bridge, send the asylum request to both governments. Remind the interceptors that firing on a medical vessel is a war crime. She gestured for Tom to follow her. Let's check on your friend. They found Rhea in Medical Bay 3, surrounded by advanced healing equipment. The Drakari doctor looked up as they entered. She'll make a full recovery, she reported. But she's asking for you, she nodded to Tom. Rhea lay in the medical pod, her blue skin already looking healthier. They told me what you did, she said as Tom approached. Requesting asylum, you can never go back now. Neither can you, he reminded her. Intelligence agents who run tend to have short life expectancies. Then I guess we're both refugees now, she smiled weakly. But at least we're alive to be refugees. Captain Reed cleared her throat. You'll both need to give statements. And fair warning, this ship is headed to the Europa colony. The Relief Corps has a major medical center there. It's neutral territory, but both your governments have representatives stationed there. More problems to solve tomorrow, Tom said, taking Rhea's hand. For now, just focus on healing. You know, Rhea said thoughtfully, back in intelligence, they taught us that humans were impulsive, irrational, and dangerous. She squeezed his hand. They were right about the impulsive part. And they taught us that Drakari were cold, calculating, and heartless, Tom replied. I guess we both had a lot to learn. Outside the medical bay viewport, the interceptors finally turned away, their running lights fading into the star-filled darkness. The Hope's journey continued on its course to Europa colony, carrying its cargo of second chances and new beginnings. Europa colony gleamed like a pearl against the darkness of space, its massive domes housing millions of beings from dozens of species. The Hope's journey docked at the medical center, its arrival causing quite a stir among the diplomatic community. It wasn't every day that a human special operations officer and a Drakari intelligence agent sought asylum together. 2 weeks had passed since their rescue. Rhea's treatments were nearly complete, the advanced medical technology of the Relief Corps having worked wonders on her injuries. Tom visited her daily, watching as she grew stronger, their unusual friendship deepening despite the chaos surrounding them. The review board is ready, Captain Reed announced one morning, entering Rhea's medical room. Both your governments have agreed to a joint hearing. Whatever they decide will determine your status here. Tom and Rhea exchanged glances. They'd known this day was coming, but that didn't make it easier. The hearing chamber was packed with officials from both sides, their faces stern and disapproving. Security officers stood ready, as if 2 exhausted refugees might somehow threaten the peace. The human representative spoke first. Officer Miller, you violated multiple protocols, abandoned your post, and aided what was technically an enemy combatant. How do you justify these actions? Tom stood straight, his voice clear. With respect, sir, I justify them with our own military code. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Rhea was helpless, abandoned, and would have died. Enemy or not, I couldn't let that happen. The Drakari representative's antennae twitched. Agent Rhea, you shared classified information with a human operative and fled your duty. This is normally considered treason. What I shared, Rhea responded carefully, was the truth about myself. After seeing Tom risk everything to save my life, I couldn't maintain the lies we'd been taught about humans. Sometimes truth is more important than protocol. Captain Reed stepped forward. If I may, representatives. The Relief Corps has reviewed their actions and statements. We believe this incident, while unorthodox, represents exactly the kind of bridge building both our peoples claim to want. They chose compassion over conflict, trust over fear. The chamber erupted in heated discussions. Hours passed as both governments' representatives argued, debated, and finally reached a decision. In light of the unique circumstances, the human representative announced, and considering the ongoing peace efforts, we've agreed to grant you both protected status here on Europa Colony. You'll work with the Relief Corps, helping other refugees adjust to their new lives. Consider it a form of community service. And a chance to prove that cooperation between our species is possible, the Drakari representative added, almost grudgingly. Later, standing at a viewport overlooking Europa's vast garden dome, Tom and Rhea watched ships coming and going, carrying people of all species seeking new beginnings. You know what's funny? Rhea said, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. When you found me in that pod, I thought it was the worst luck imaginable. A human soldier discovering me at my weakest moment. She turned to face him. Instead, it turned out to be the best luck of my life. We both got lucky, Tom replied. I found someone who reminded me why I joined the service in the first place, to help others, not just follow orders. He gestured at the busy spaceport below. And now we get to keep doing that, together. Together, Rhea agreed. Though I still think you're impulsive and irrational sometimes. And you're still occasionally cold and calculating, Tom laughed. But maybe that's what makes us work so well as a team. As they watched the sun rise over Europa's horizon, painting the domes in shades of gold and pink, both reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. A soldier's choice, a moment of trust, an escape against all odds, small things that could change the course of lives, and maybe, in some small way, help change the course of history. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from grand battles or careful plans, but from simple acts of kindness in the darkest moments. And sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is choose to save a life rather than take one.